All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm formally calling this meeting of the Academic Senate to order. Today is November 4th. It is 3:05 p.m. Hopefully you can see my screen. All right, so item 2.2 are Academic Senate community values. Today's meeting is going to be a lot of discussion, not a lot of action. And so I do want to remind you all that we do have these community values that we developed together. So a couple just to call out at the beginning of the meeting. The conversations we're having today are really, really important. Today's one of the days that you need to say things in the meeting. This is going to be one of our big shots to talk about the budget. Things are going to be happening kind of quickly with the budget, so please bring your thoughts to the table today out loud. It would be wonderful if we all had a chance to voice our thoughts. The other thing I want to mention is along those same lines, why am I talking? Why aren't I talking? Right. So that duality of not talking too much, but contributing to the conversation. Also, I want to call out the last one, committed to working with an equity mindset, especially today for our budget discussion in times of austerity and scarcity. Equity is one of the first things that can be gone out the window, as well as thinking about like every man, every department, every program for themselves. So we really want to make sure that we are working together as a Senate body to represent the faculty body in shared governance processes as a whole as best we can today. So just those are the couple I want to call out. I know you all know the rest. Our Zoom guidelines, I think we've been pretty good with having our Zoom guidelines slightly relaxed, having you all as senators, when you're called upon, using the virtual hand to contribute to the conversation in the order that your hand is raised. I think that's been going really smoothly, so let's keep that going. And also our voting is going to be done because of the Brown Act via a roll call vote. I'm not sure if we're voting on anything today, but if we do. All right, so item 2.4, can I have a volunteer please read our land acknowledgement? Let's see, Trisha.
See it and do it at the same time, so sorry about that. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place the land that City College sits upon, their home. We are honored to be guests upon this land and are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding.
Thank you so much for that. So now we're at item 2.5, approval of the agenda. There will be no items taken out of order for today's agenda. So the meeting, unless I hear any objections or any indication otherwise, the meeting agenda will proceed as distributed. All right, so now we're at item 3.1. I received no request for public comment prior to the meeting. Christina, I assume the same for you as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at this time, should a member from the public want to make a public comment now or at a later agenda item, please indicate so by either unmuting yourself or raising your virtual hand in the participants field. Okay, and I'm not hearing a call from the public to do so. And so I'm going to move on to communications. I do not have a written president's report for you all this week. We just met last week and I had a written report then. You should expect another one from me November 18th at our next meeting. But I do want to say that yesterday at CBC, Dr. Goswami did make the announcement that he is going to be hiring 4 of our top ranked positions. So specifically ADN will go out for hiring, and that is not from the general funds. So then DSPS will also be going out for hiring. He approved a position for them, and they also have only 20% out of the general funds. And then the 2 approved positions that are out of general funds that he guaranteed to us throughout all of his conversations with me throughout the summer, we're going to go out for medical imaging sciences. So remember that was one of the positions that was a failed search last year, as well as journalism. And Patricia is absolutely thrilled, not that this was, you know, a personal thing for Patricia, but she is thrilled, of course, with that. And frankly, so am I, as the channels is an important part of our campus. Dr. Goswami did tell me previously that depending on where the proposition, I think it was 15 went, we could adjust that conversation, but I believe that one was voted down. So as of yesterday, this is what we're moving forward with. And should that ever change, I will let you know. Robbie, quick question for clarification.
Yeah, so we put forward that list, and we put forward our hope that he would hire more than 2, even if that meant layoffs. It was his decision whether or not to honor that part strictly based on Prop 15?
No. The 2 don't have anything to do with each other.
Okay, so when will we know if we're going to get more than the 2 that actually come out of our general fund?
I don't think we are. I do not think that we should plan on that in any way. But if it does, it will happen when he so decides, right? Like when things shake out.
And we don't have an indication of when that'll be.
I mean, it depends on how quickly things move. Like, so to answer this adequately, I think we should wait until we're having the budget discussion later. But Dr. Goswami wants to move on things as such as the zero-based balancing of staff and administrative positions, like as soon as November, which is now, right? So depending on what work comes out of that, I mean, maybe if they lay off all these people, I don't know. Like I hate talking about stuff like this because it just makes people nervous because this is all speculation. But like, let me say it like this: things need to shake out, right? So I don't have an answer for that. I don't think Dr. Goswami has an answer to that yet. And as I've been saying all along, I don't think that we should be counting on this, right?
He did say that the earliest it would be next semester. He mentioned maybe having an idea in January, but that we shouldn't expect if it did happen. The earliest it could even happen would be April if it did happen, but yeah.
Yeah. Ruth, your hand is up.
Yes, that he also announced, what was I going to say? That for our VP of extended, oh my gosh.
Oh, yes. Vice President, School of Extended Learning.
Right, School of Extended Learning. I was going to say ESL, I messed up my letters. The offer was made to Joyce Coleman and she has accepted.
Yep, and that email went out to School of Extended Learning today. So congrats, Trisha. You got some leadership.
Yes.
Stability, leadership, all good things. Yes, thank you for that reminder, Ruth. Okay. So Senate liaison reports. We didn't have a formal written report. Ruth just shared out what else happened at CPC yesterday. Do any of my other Senate liaisons want to mention anything at this time? Robin, Pam, Michelle, or Ellen even? Okay, I'm not seeing any, which brings me to the Executive Vice President report. Pamela.
I do not have anything to report outside the good news you just shared. I was really excited that we were able to make a case for more than simply the 2 general funded positions, both of which I celebrated a lot. And I think we'll be able to address the health and wellness position by considering that going forward in a different way. So I think 4 positions was more than we thought we might accomplish. And I think the work that you all did was really great. help build that case. And I'll tell you, on behalf of Ed Programs, we're really glad we were able to bring forward our ideas and concerns about the prioritization. And I know that has been a contentious issue sometimes, but I think it worked out really well. So thanks for the opportunity. We were glad you could listen to us.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that just along those lines, I'll also add, if it wasn't obvious, that Dr. Goswami went with our rankings 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's not that he ignored the dean's rankings. Our rankings were very similar as the dean's rankings. It's just that he landed on ours, and I think ours were perhaps what they were because of the collaboration we had with the deans and hearing those rankings beforehand. Okay, all right. So I received no requests from the public to agendize items at future meetings. Please remind your faculty that that's there. So should somebody from, let's call it the general public, the faculty body as a whole, want to bring an item forward for the Senate to consider, this is one avenue to do so. We have no items on our consent agenda, item 6.1, so moving right along, which brings us to item 8.1, academic quality as related to Administrative Procedure 4105. So before we get started on this, I'd like to say a couple things about timing. I'm not saying this to limit the discussion. Well, no, actually that's exactly what I'm trying to do. For items 8.1 and 8.2, I'm hoping that our discussion about these items are somewhat limited. And that's in an effort to get us to focus on item 8.3, identifying faculty needs for the budget discussions. So with that in mind, let's proceed with these discussions. But if the Senate feels very strongly that we need to discuss items 8.1 or 8.2 longer, that's fine. You know, we're here for our work, but it was my intention that we kind of move through these kind of quickly so that we can focus on the budget. So just keep that in mind as you're contributing to conversations, that everything has a cost, so to speak, in terms of time. Patricia.
Oh, yes, I wanted to tell you that there are 2 changes to 4105 since the Senate looked at it last week. So if you give me just a couple of minutes, I can point those out.
I was definitely going to. I would love for you to point out the changes about 4105. So I'll bring that up if you
Okay,
want.
you know where to go, Ray. Scroll down. So folks, at the last meeting, there were concerns expressed about first off, let us say that in terms of the learning management system, I'm sorry, 3 changes. We added in language about distance education, and at the request of BPAP, because people were concerned about deans being a little reckless about allowing exceptions, I added in language that the academic senate president or designee would also be pulled into the conversation about whether an instructor would be allowed to be an exception to using Canvas as the main portal for students. So that's one change that's different than what you saw a week ago. The other change is that we everyone seemed very nervous about classroom visitation protocols being overused, being that possibly administrative overreach in this. So we added a first sentence that says classroom visitation may be necessary as a response to student complaints. And there's one other exception to this, but you can see lower there. And then we added, these steps include bringing their complaint forward, again, making sure that all the language here is in direct response to a department chair who desires to look at a class because he or she feels that they need to do so in order to investigate and resolve a complaint. And other than that, it is the same as what you saw last week. And BPAP did sign off on this. This is now, I know it needs I pulled it out of the policy, Ray. It's bugging me too. But hey, I don't have quotes around it, so you can add a pronoun there. Is it a pronoun? Yeah. No, it's an adjective. Add the.
Done.
So folks, where this is that BPAP has now looked at this. It is now in the participatory governance process. So if we decide that we like this and we want to bring it to our constituents, we can certainly talk about the changes that were made, but if we want to bring it to our constituents, I just want to point out that BPAP meets again November 20th and again on December 4th. And we would have to have our feedback back by the latest December 4th if we were going to get this implemented for spring 2021. And other than that, Ray, it reflects what you guys saw 2 weeks ago. I mean, last week.
Got it. Thank you for that intro, Patricia. Tricia.
Yeah, I think this is something maybe we need to look at, or I need to look at in between now and December 4th. But I was wondering about thank you for adding that part about the grievance procedure. But what about, say, law and credit? We don't have department chairs or a dean. So is that something that I need to look into and maybe make a suggestion to add to that?
Who investigates your complaints?
I'm not entirely sure. That's what I need to probably investigate. So I'm not sure what our
Yeah, when you find that out, let's
okay, then add it to that. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't, guys, forgive me for saying this. I am definitely mentioning I'm elevating urgency here because there are parts of this I really want in place for spring.
Okay.
But if there are any significant content changes to this, it will kick off the whole shared governance process again. So maybe we could save any significant content changes and do those in the spring. And then we could just start the whole process again. But see what I'm saying? This document, unless we change it today, really needs to go forward pretty much as written if we're going to get spring implementation.
Yeah.
Am I saying that clearly, Ray?
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to make it. I had a visceral reaction to that because it's not that we can't make changes. It's not us strong arming the Senate into saying, well, it's this or nothing, right? What Patricia's trying to say is like, because of our processes, if something else gets significantly changed here and we bring it back to BPAP, then BPAP says, okay, now CSA gets to look at this, now ALA gets to look at it. Right? So that's why Patricia's saying like, it's got to be within the realm of these changes just so that we can stay on track with what we were trying to accomplish with the changes. If we want to overhaul this more in depth, which I think we do right now that we've all been living in the distance education world, I think that we do, then we can do that work in the spring. And all it would take is for, one of us on BPAP to say to BPAP, we're going to start looking at this, and then the Senate can do the changes they want, and then it goes to BPAP and then back out. Yeah. Russell.
Yes. Sorry about that. Finding the unmute. So my department brought two, minor clarification changes, Patricia. Can I read them to you, or would you like me to email them?
Well, I think, yeah, let's hear them. And by the way, Ray, you have to put any notes in here.
Oh, am I not in? Oh, I'm in editing mode. You're right. I got to put suggestion.
Yeah.
Got it. I'll do that now.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Russell, we're just trying to figure out how to capture your notes. So okay.
I can copy and paste this into the text box if you like.
Sure.
All right, I'll do that right now, and then we can just move on and we can look at that. So here, I'm going to copy one. All right.
Add it as a comment, okay?
Yes, so under that's find a participant. All right.
He's putting it in the chat box for the.
I'm trying to, but.
Is the chat activated? It is.
There we go. All right.
I am not seeing anything.
That's because I'm slow to click. Right. So there.
We're looking in Google Chat, or are we looking at a Google Doc?
Sorry, in Zoom chat. Oh, and
In Zoom chat, so you guys will see it live.
he sent it.
It'll only go to Ray.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Got it.
That's why I'm not seeing it.
I got it.
I mean, Russell, why don't you just tell us what they are while Ray's doing the copy and pasting?
You're asking me to multitask, which is beyond me. There, I
Okay.
pasted them, both the verbiage and the recommended, change. So if you guys read that, or Ray, if you choose to share it. So the first one shows the verbiage, the protocol, right? Classroom visitations may be necessary as a response to student complaints, and then follow that, clarified further, encouraging words that the chairs are encouraged to work with faculty first, as opposed to, go straight to the dean. That was change number one. And then change number two was just with notice. If there's going to be a drop by and a visitation by the dean, faculty member would at least get 24 hours notice.
I think that's in there. The course instructor shall be notified via email prior to visitation with a minimum of a 24-hour notice.
Did that come out of BPAL? Because this is where this is, I believe.
Oh yeah, no, that's the core of it. You just hit the thesis statement of this whole, what that 24-hour notice is. That's always been there.
Got it.
And also, guys, let me tell you that three people driving
Oh.
this document's making me kind
I
of
think it's
nauseous.
the purpose and length. So it wasn't just the notification, it was what it's for and how long they plan on doing it for.
Oh, okay, yeah,
You see, it just all is slight clarifications in both areas.
okay.
There.
Okay.
Can you, so this is what Russ, this was one suggestion. Added there.
Let me address the first thing, guys. This is a little bit tricky, but what we have before us is we have one AP, I think I can't remember, 5503, which involves what are the steps for which a student can complain about a class. And the steps move from an informal, the preliminary steps, which at that point it's considered a complaint. And they have to go through that preliminary step in order to go to the more formal step of actually filing a grievance. So that's in another procedure. And what this one, I'm sorry, it's right in front of me. It's 5530. What this one does is it says, okay, that's already established. You can't go to, a student can't go to a dean until they've gone to the department chair. And if that happens, then a dean is violating 5530. The first thing you do is you go to the faculty. If that doesn't work, then you go to the department chair. If that doesn't work, then you go to the dean. So we can definitely add language saying that, the department chair will, try to work with faculty first. I think that's actually kind of understood, but they can't go straight to the dean. If they do, they're already violating another procedure. Is that clear? Not much sleep last night, guys. So I'm kind of, running around in circles here.
Yes, that's clear, but the fact that it's in another AP doesn't make it clear here. And unless you're familiar with both, it can be uncomfortable for some people.
Hey, Russell, I add the green that you all should be able to see is what you put in the chat, and I edited so it's in the AP. Does that capture what you were trying to get at?
That's exactly it, Ray. Thank you. That's perfect. As far as I'm concerned, we're done.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Russell. Pam?
So a concern from my department was, what's the parallel to this in a face-to-face class?
There is actually nothing spelled out in AP 5530 about how a department chair would go about investigating a student complaint. I'm going to be completely honest with you. All it does is it sets up the order in which the student must move through the process. So my response to that is AP 5530 is actually, the title of it is Student Rights and Grievances. The whole approach to it is, what does a student have a right to? It's not particularly focused on what protocol should be for faculty. You see what I'm saying? It's from the student's point of view. So I mean, I think there does need to be a parallel. I think we need to add it to 5530, or we need to create a new AP, because it's not a perfect fit in 5530. But what I'm saying is there is not a parallel at this point. We can certainly start working on that again in early spring if we feel we need the parallel. I think it's a great idea, but we're not going to get that done this semester. So we could approve this with the intent that we will create a parallel structure for face-to-face in early spring. That can be our plan. But honestly, there is none. That's an observation.
Pamela, I saw your hand go up. I'll get to you in just one second. I just wanted to say, I want to loop us back to why we were making these edits and these changes. So we have had very few incidences, but incidences nevertheless, of instructors not using their Canvas shell for their class content, / not using any, anything other than email for teaching their classes. So as the Senate, we voted back in, what was it, late September, to say that that is not good enough, right? And I sent that statement that we agreed to during our meeting out to the faculty body, the credit faculty body at that time. And then we said that we wanted something in policy by next semester. And so that is why we are doing this work here. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. So with that, I'll call on Pamela.
Oh, wait, can I follow up on what you just said?
Yes.
So I totally agree with that, but this is more than just checking if whether or not a faculty member is using Canvas.
Well, because as we had these conversations, it was, what is the grievance policy?
I mean, I agree. I think we need to have this. I'm just, saying from my department's perspective, if all we were doing is saying that you have a complaint that someone isn't using the learning management system, and then this is what we are writing in response to that, I think that would be fine. But this goes a little deeper than that. And the concern with some of my colleagues is we do not have something similar when you're teaching face-to-face. So it seems like,
Well, we do. We have a whole grievance policy. What Patricia is saying is we don't have it spelled out that the department chair walks into the classroom.
Yeah.
Right? But we have a grievance policy. We absolutely do for students. And that's what we're mimicking here. Because I mean, I guess I'm misunderstanding what your department is trying to say, because if a student complains about anything, how do we look at that if it's in the virtual world? If it was face-to-face, we would walk into the classroom, right? Pamela?
Well, I was going to say some version of that, but back to Pam and the concerns raised by her department is a really good framework for this. These are analogs. They are not identical. The face-to-face experience and the virtual experience we're working all the time to make one look like a facsimile of the other, but we can't. And so we need to be able to make appropriate boundaries and expectations that fit within each of the appropriate spaces. So the grievance process could be further detailed about how a chair actually works with a faculty member, how a dean actually does that in the face-to-face world. But you can walk by a classroom and see if somebody's holding class. You can't walk by the Canvas shell to see if somebody's opened the next module or is responding to student emails. So the communication happens in all of these alternative ways. And so in order to support student success, we have to be able to kind of enter in using the expectations that we do establish for face-to-face interaction, right? That's why 24 hours notice. That's why trying to get it solved at the lowest level of concern. All of those things that are established for us. But this is really trying to think about how do we shape that virtual environment so that students have access to really quality education, and how do we make sure that we can support a claim against that? So it's not going to ever match, but we need to try to build structures that are comparable.
And I think from my point of view, I wouldn't want the lack of specificity for investigating a student complaint face-to-face to limit our work here, right? I think if that's true, then we need to go clean that up better.
I think there's concern of abuse and, you know, what kind of complaint would have someone come in, although that thing I just said has more to do with the grievance policy than this policy.
Right. And here's what, you know, I mean, I think we need and want, as the Academic Senate, a mechanism here to get a student complaint looked at in the online world. And then, you know, the mechanism for, like, if it's being abused, well, then that's going to go through, you know, a process with HR and the FA. I don't want to let that get us bogged down in not making a mechanism so that students saying, like, you know, XYZ about this.
Totally agrees. I mean, we have to have a way of making sure the quality of education we're providing is what we want it to be.
Well, and I would argue that it should go both ways. Like, I totally am sensitive to the abuse argument, but also, like, what if a student is saying XYZ about a professor and there's no way, or instructor, and there's no way to dismiss that claim, right? So it's, anyways, I hope this addressed some things, Pam, for you or the department. I don't know. Anyone else? Cornelia?
So I would like to also read from the questions I received from my department. So let's stay with the section we just talked about. A question from the business division also was, is there a comparable process for face-to-face classes with respect to the visitation rights? And we just discussed that, but I wanted to confirm that this was a question from the business division too. The second one with respect to the visitation right is the requirement, the 24 hours turnaround time. What if the instructor is contacted over the weekend? Is then the 24 hours still like the relevant time frame? Because maybe an instructor has a policy that if all their work is like due Monday through Friday, that instructor does not check email over the weekend. This is with respect to the visitation rights. Then on the learning management system, and I hope I get this right, the middle sentence where faculty may incorporate textbooks or other learning materials similar to an on-campus course experience to support the primary learning experience. So the concern was that I think the idea is that the SBCC approved learning management system, currently Canvas, is to be used in all online courses and at a minimum must serve as the portal of entry to the course and course activities. And it appears that the middle sentence that I just read is not needed. It might create confusion or needless discussion as there are too many legitimate situations for which Canvas will link external resources. I think, you know, we all use Canvas and we use YouTube videos and LinkedIn Learning and whatever. So trying to kind of capture the variety in that sentence appeared to be a concern for some of my, for people in the business division. The last one, I just want to mention that to be complete, it's actually with respect to the existing language in the policy, not the revised language, but I'm asked to mention that it appears that the existing mentoring program that is described in the policy is currently not in use or at least not implemented.
Is that true outside of our emergency DE situation?
That's what was communicated to me.
Cornelia, did somebody ask their department chair to enter into such a situation? They were told no. Why are they saying it's not enforced? We don't advertise it or promote it, but it's definitely in place. We talked about this at length when we were talking about what kind of training we would accept for
Okay.
distance learning. So was somebody told they couldn't do it?
I know.
I do not know. I tell you honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
Because of the limited time, I get input feedback from my department by email. So this is what I got and this is what I read.
Okay, let me just say that back in the spring when we were deciding, and when I say we, I mean, various leadership groups on campus, including the CAC and the faculty professional development folks, we were deciding what would the training look like to qualify faculty to teach distance ed. And we talked about the mentoring program and agreed it would be one of the components we would accept because it's in our AP. So my understanding is that it had not been made defunct.
Yeah, but I also think it's not formalized, nor is it like centralized anywhere. So I think this
no
is one of
question
those things
about
we
it.
need to give to COI, right? To have it function and actually be somewhere to go to and say, go through COI, and they'll identify folks, hopefully in your division, in your department, in your discipline. But that's where we start.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you also want me to put what I just said in the chat?
No, I removed the one sentence, Cornelia, that you mentioned, or at least suggested to remove it. And then the other thing I think we already talked about.
Well, the one more thing was the weekend.
Yeah, so I think
you know-
we could make that like business hours.
Yeah, let's
and
just
say,
add,
you
let's
know,
just add 24, how can we say that? A notice of 24 business hours.
Well, that
Business.
could be 3 days, right? Or 2 days or whatever, do the math. I'm good
One
with Greek
business day.
letters.
Is that the,
Fine.
we have a terminology we use in BPAP all the time. And Cornelia, I have to say, I really agree with your decision to cut out that middle sentence, because what we've learned in BPAP is every time you create a list, if something is not on that list, it becomes actionable. So it really is better not to present what's essentially a false list. That's a good suggestion.
Okay, so unless there's further discussion, Patricia and myself and, I'm blanking. Christopher Brown will be taking these suggestions back to BPAP.
Just a quick note to add an E after on, right where you are.
Add an E.
No,
Add an-
Ray,
For
Ray,
what, for one, right? It should be one, not on business days.
Oh, no, is that not correct English? 24-hour notice. Oh, I said during previously. Is it during or on? During business days?
We,
actually, I think on was probably more correct.
On?
And Ray,
could
I think,
you say with one business day's notice?
Well, what I'm trying to say is 24-hour notice
how
within.
about just not including the weekends?
I'm bad at.
That's better.
One business day, that's clear, without the 24 hours.
Oh, with a minimum.
Or could you say Monday through Friday? Oh, no, because we might have a holiday.
One business day or 24 hours, not including weekends.
That's
Do I
good,
have-
Robbie. Thank you.
Can I add that in later? Can we move on so I'm not typing one-handed with a baby? Together.
Robbie, do you remember what you just said?
Yes, I do.
Send it to me.
You
Rob.
must have
Put it
slept
in the
last
chat.
night.
I'm disappointed, Ray.
I do need to correct you on one thing.
Careful.
I don't think we want to bring this back to BPAP until our senators have had a chance to share the new changes with their respective areas.
Oh, okay.
So what I would ask is that you guys go ahead and take this out, see if there's any more feedback. I'm hoping there's not, because otherwise we're gonna, never mind. See if there's feedback. And then we agendize this for the next Senate meeting. And then if we can get this resolved at our next Senate meeting, we're on track to get it to BPAP for spring implementation. Was that clear?
Yep.
Send it
Jennifer,
back out.
Counselor Jen?
Hi, thank you. So there was a concern from our division, my division, that in regards to Canvas being the LMS, that the they don't agree with having exceptions. And so that was just something I wanted to bring forward, that was
Meaning what? That we're only allowed to use Canvas, right?
correct.
I think that's what we're trying to accomplish.
But where is the wording? It does say exceptions granted by the chair or something like that.
It does allow for exceptions.
By the department chair, area dean, and dean responsible for distance education.
So they have to go through all those protocols in order to get that approved to use something other than Canvas?
Yep.
And then how would students know what the alternative is for their class?
Well, that instructor would be expected to make that crystal clear to their students.
Yeah, so one good example would be a fully dual enrollment class at a high school, right? That may circumvent Canvas because they use Google Classroom or whatever it may be. Right, and then it's that instructor's responsibility to inform them.
Yeah, or this
Non-credit.
or this, yeah, thank you, Trisha. Or this would be, this is during non-COVID times, right? So like what would our normal class?
So would there be, I guess, what do you call that? I'm sorry, I can't blink. I too had a late night. Lack of sleep. So but kind of like a few, I don't even, okay. I can't think right now, I apologize, but I will think of it and I will add it to this when we send it out to our division. So I just need to think.
Just, we'll talk about it next time. Yeah, okay. All right, I will send this out via email so that you all have our current changes. And now we're moving on to item 8.2, board policy 3052. I would like to point out that while this is coming to us, that this is board policy, which means that it's not necessarily our purview and that this is board say and purview. With that, there are a number of things in here that affect our life on campus and that we want to review and discuss. And so we have that opportunity now. I'll ask, does anybody want to start our conversation off? Robbie?
Yeah, I substituted for Ray at BPAP last week and Patricia was there too. This is a difficult policy. It's saying that things that are legal, fraternizing with somebody, are not allowed of our employees. And so some things that I just wanted to use to introduce this topic to the whole conversation are that it is imperfect, and it's, as it was said earlier, it's hard to create a list of things that are not allowed because then it becomes actionable, and what if something is not on the list? It is the mechanism for making a complaint, and we had added at BPAP that this is just the mechanism for initiating a complaint. If a complaint is made against you, that does not automatically mean that you're guilty of it and subject to sanction, right? So I'm giving all these caveats because I think it's really, really important that this policy get through. And I think that the benefit of having such a policy can outweigh the detriments of various little instances of vagueness within the policy.
Patricia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that, Robbie. Guys, BPAP spent 2 entire meetings, almost a total of 3 hours discussing this. And what I want to point out is that we did make changes. I think the changes improve the document. Some of the original language called for basically we would be required reporters if we saw any of our colleagues engaged in any of this activity. We try to, and I think the most important thing is we added a list of exceptions. In other words, if you already have a relationship with a person who's a student, you don't have to stop having that friendship or whatever, because now they're a student. So we tried to make it better. We were mindful the whole time that the board is going to do what the board is going to do. And therefore we wanted to give them changes that we thought would be palatable, but at the same time were more reasonable than what they originally put out. And you can see we deliberately kept all of the notes in there so that you could see how BPAP changed it. But this is tricky, folks. We're kind of threading a needle here because we need to represent what we believe, our conscience, our professionalism. But at the same time, it's against the backdrop of what Ray said, and that is this is a board policy. They have to consult with us, but they can reject every single one of our recommendations. So with that, we can jump into it. It's a doozy.
And what I want to say to that actually is, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about our board a lot of the time, but I will say this. When I saw that they developed this policy, even with the issues that it originally had, I was very happy. I think the board, in terms of the spirit of what this board policy says, is going to be very on board. It's the details that I think Patricia means that they might reject or throw out, but the board is the one that originated this, and I'm very happy that they did. Tricia?
Yeah, I haven't run this by the non-credit faculty, but obviously that's a different dynamic. I mean, for classes like adult high school, very similar, to the credit campus, but some of the painting and classes with older adults, I'm wondering, I see that non-credit was added as there is, equivalent to all the other students, right? So what if there's no grade or nothing required? You mean nobody who takes a non-credit class can date any of the other people who teach non-credit classes? Is that going to be a potential issue?
Well, I think what's important to remember about this, my 3-year-old just got home. Yes, I'm doing work. So the point of this BP is to protect students. There's Franny. There is currently an instructor out on administrative leave because he did drugs and slept with a student. And so that is where this B is coming from. And I am sorry if that is shocking for people, but that is where this is coming from. And unfortunately, we need to create policy to tell people very obvious things. So to answer your question a little bit more directly, this wasn't, there can be the argument of consenting adults and things like that. But in terms of non-credit, students engaging with their instructors and things like that, it would be prohibited by the letter of the law of this policy, but there would also be due process, right? So let's say it gets turned in, then HR would look into it, and then, they would interview the student, they would interview the instructor, right? I assume that FAN would get involved, right? Your governing, or sorry, not your governing, but your
yeah, sort of pseudo equivalent of faculty association. Yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to anticipate questions because it is a whole different situation. It's not, there's not grades or power as much, as there is here. So, all right, that helps.
I think it's important to view this BP in light of the Me Too movement. I think it's important to view this BP in light of instructors dating their students, current students, current multiple students, right? We have had several incidences within the last few years of instructors having inappropriate relationships with their students.
So that's actually just, it's their student. Is that how it's defined? Someone who's enrolled in their class, or is it students in general? So if somebody in the econ department could date or would do whatever with somebody who's not taking econ classes in the math department, is that Or is it just students in general?
Let me pull up the language for you. Patricia,
Well-
Roby, can you answer that for her while I pull it up?
There is no language specifically saying that they have to be a student in your class. As a matter of fact, we have a BP that says that has that limiting on it. This does not have that limitation on it unless I can, unless I'm just having a moment. And I think the idea behind that is that our students' experience at City College is so fluid. They may not be taking your class this semester, but they may take it next semester, et cetera, et cetera. Although I don't have an answer. We didn't talk about that at BPAP in all honesty. But my understanding is it's all students.
Jenny.
Patricia, with respect to what you just said, you said we already have a BP that addresses that issue. So how is this BP different than whatever other BP you just referenced?
This goes way further. We
Okay.
have, I can't remember which one it is, Jenny, but the Senate was responsible for adding this language. And it has to do, I think it's with in our harassment policy. And we say that that faculty cannot have a sexual or romantic relationship with any student enrolled in their classes. And that if they do, it would be considered a Title IX investigation. So we have that, but this addresses, if you take a look at the bullet items, drinking with students, smoking pot with students, fraternization is kind of the driving word here.
Well, and also Linda Dozier, our Title IX officer, has brought up that if it happens off campus, it's not necessarily a Title IX investigation according to the new Title IX laws. So if it's not a Title IX and we don't have a BP specifying it, how do we address this? Ruth?
I'm all for the intent of this. I do have a few concerns because of like how broadly defined these things are, or how the failure of a definition. So like fraternizing or generally accepted behavior, like how is that defined? So I know this is in our policy document, but something to bring up to the board, the potential for numerous lawsuits I can see if we try to limit faculty behavior outside of the workplace. And then like the role of prior knowledge, for example, I didn't know that was my student. We went to a bar and we were drinking, or not my student, but not that I'm, me personally sleeping with 20-year-olds, but you know what I mean? I'm just saying these arguments that could come up, or even maybe not sleeping with them, but drinking with them or whatever may happen. And then I think it's also prudent of us to recommend or advise them to consult an attorney in this particular area rather than just our own in-house attorneys, because they're certainly not experts in that or much of anything else. And then I also had the concern that Trisha brought up about current student versus not current student. For example, using myself as an example, again, not sleeping with 20-year-olds. But if I have a student who's taken the only 2 classes that I offer or 3, definitely not going to take classes again, right? And maybe something comes out of that. Not going to happen, but hypothetically.
Yeah.
Some concerns to bring up.
I have some thoughts about that. I don't want to be the only one pushing back on this stuff, but I'm definitely going to. So yeah, limiting what we can do outside of work. I think we need to ask ourselves, is it okay to drink or do drugs with a student outside of work? And
absolutely, I agree with that.
Well,
I'm saying like these squishy definitions of like generally accepted.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Is it okay for somebody to say when they sleep with somebody, I didn't know she was 16? It's your job to find out what you are, like who you are engaging with. I don't accept that I didn't know that they weren't a student as an excuse for doing drugs and drinking.
I agree, but that's you, Rayanne. So I'm just like advice for an improvement of the policy.
No, it should be SBCC. What kind of college do we want to be?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
No, I agree. Again, I agree with the intent. I just think we need to work on the wording. I absolutely agree with the intent.
Ellen?
I want to echo a lot of what Ruth said. I very strongly agree with the intent of this. I I just find it appalling that any of our faculty would ever do drugs with and sleep with a student, especially students who are taking credit classes, especially students who are, younger, where there's all sorts of a whole variety of different power dynamics. And as Ruth said, I also have some concerns about the vagueness of some of the language, and I'll use an example. So when I arrived in Santa Barbara, shortly after I moved to Santa Barbara, there was a lesbian meetup group got formed, and I started going to those events. It turns out that several of the people who are involved in that meetup group are always taking non-credit classes. Like one takes sculpture every term, always taking non-credit classes. So with that, I'm concerned about a policy that could be interpreted to say that I could never go to any of those meetup events because there are people there, because there's alcohol being served and there are people there who are taking non-credit classes. And do I have to ask everyone in the room, raise your hand, is anyone taking a non-credit class at SBCC? Oh, okay, I gotta leave. So I know that's not the intent of this, and I do want to reiterate that I do 100% support the intent. But I also think the language needs to be clearer so that we're not creating an opportunity for it to be used to go after who's not engaging in any behavior that we're actually trying to prevent. And as a queer person, that's something I think about too. Like right now, I trust that I'm not going to be targeted as a lesbian at this campus. But that's, I can't trust that that's always going to be the case, depending on who's in leadership. So that's something I think about from that perspective too.
So you brought up a great point about going to like a meetup, but the idea here is that you shouldn't be giving alcohol to this person, right? So it's not about going to some group that is hosting an event and people from the public are there and you just happen to be there, right? This is about feeding students alcohol and doing drugs with them.
And I completely agree, but that, as Ruth said, that language fraternize doesn't make that distinction clear. So I think it needs to be.
So if we change the word, can we all agree to the idea of all of this?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if that's the word that everybody is going to get hung up on,
Absolutely.
Let's kill it right now. I just don't want to sit here and live in the land of slippery slopes when we're talking about something very straightforward is, hey, don't do drugs, don't sleep with students, don't give them alcohol. And I don't want to get into this whole argument of, well, what if they're 58 and I knew them before and blah, 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 blah. Like, it just seems so counterproductive to go through all of those, well, what ifs right now when we're trying to keep students protected from an instructor. Trisha.
Well, so I agree with what was just said. That we're trying to do is ensure that this is followed and that there's not a potential, inadvertent, I don't say backlash, that's not the right word, but that it's not being applied when it shouldn't be. And so again, that's not slippery slope, but if I am going out after you celebrate the end of class and we go out and then, to a restaurant and we get drinks, that does happen in non-credit. People do sometimes socialize with their students a little bit and it's a different dynamic. So I guess my question though is what's the consequence? And you addressed this earlier when it says it's prohibited. what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that that's grounds for being fired? Does that mean that it's you could be sanctioned, that a mark would be put in your record, or that you would be talked to? So again, I'm just trying to anticipate questions that I may get from other faculty, especially in my area. So I think it's the intent can still be there and really strengthened without getting into the situation that Ellen was talking about, or that I'm talking about, going out to eat with some of your students and then you order alcohol, I guess. Not that I've ever done that, but so that's what I was trying to get at. And also when it says prohibited, I'm not really clear what that means in terms of practical.
It means that you can't do it. It means that it's a prohibited activity.
Mhm.
And Trisha, I wanna point out what you just said. Oh, if I'm out to dinner with my students and I order alcohol, not that I would ever do that. Well, if you would never do it, if that seems to be an icky, sticky point for you, then
Well, it's because I don't drink. That's why, not because, but I might say drinks on the house or something. I mean, I guess I could, or it's someone's birthday, so I'll buy you a glass of, wine or something. I mean, that, years ago when, well, anyway, I don't want, it's, I don't know, maybe you're right. We are trying to think of all these different scenarios. Again, I'm trying to anticipate questions I may get, but we'll address them when we get them. But that does clarify that, just using your judgment, maybe making the intent is to have people be more aware of what they're doing, and it is to protect students. I think people understand that. So thank you for explaining.
This is why I brought up the due process thing. We talked about this at BPAP, and I had a story where I went out with a co-worker with 2 former students, and a current student showed up. And so here we are having beers, and I'm with a current student. This is why the due process thing came up, because there's no possible way to list every possible situation. So what this policy does is it gives people a way to identify something that might be wrong. But then when that has been identified, then you go through due process. And then you say, oh, well, you were just at a meeting organized by somebody else, and it turns out that a person on the other side of the room is taking a pottery class. You're fine. Or, a current student showed up, but they weren't invited. You're fine. And that's not a perfect counter argument, because you have to trust that due process works and that the people in power aren't out to get you. But I think the risk associated with relying on such due process is lower than the risk of not having this policy and allowing coworkers to drug and sleep with students.
Patricia?
Yeah, I want to say that I think the whole non-credit question is a really big question, and I'd like to bring that back to BPAP and possibly to the board. I think predatory behavior can exist in credit or non-credit. But non-credit is different in a bunch of different ways. So I think it's a conversation we maybe should have in greater detail. But Ray, could you bring the doc back up? Because guys, I think y'all are overlooking some really big points. And to address what Ruth said about the vagueness of the language, we spent forever wordsmithing this, and we want the language to be vague. And this was my position throughout. And that is, we have got to depend on good professional ethical judgment here. And there are going to be so many cases where the situation is entirely innocent. We can come up with so many examples. But what we try to do in the language, and scroll down to that one that has the fraternization, and we say, keep going, scroll up. Okay, here we go. What we try to do is to say, all right, generally accepted is if you stop 10 people on a sidewalk, and this actually is legal language, generally accepted, and you said, what do you think is appropriate between a teacher and a student? Pretty much everybody's going to come up with the same kinds of things. Maybe, and they definitely will come up with the same kind of things about what are not appropriate. So this was meant to say, all right, we've got this concept here, but if you read the paragraph in its entirety, you'll see that fraternize means to engage or seek to engage in relationship communications or situations that fall outside of generally accepted teacher-student work-related interactions or communications, or may create the appearance of favoritism, misuse of position, quid pro quo, the abandonment of institutional goals or personal interest. If you go down a little further where we talk about the exceptions, go down further, Ray. Scroll down further and you'll see that we have made a specific exception for events open to the entire class or a relevant group or a celebratory or of end of year nature. So if we try to be more specific, then we create this idea, and this is what Robbie said earlier, what we are being told by PR experts at BPAP is that the more detailed you make a list, then the more a person can come in and say, well, I can do this because it wasn't forbidden in the list. So my take on this is that, I think most of us have a sense of what is professionally appropriate and not appropriate and ethically. If we see something that troubles us, there's language in here saying that employees are encouraged to report this, but it's going to come down to due process. And Robbie, and the whole risk thing is true. You may get snagged in a frivolous complaint. That should be dismissed very quickly. So I guess I'm just pushing back on more specific language is going to be virtually impossible to do because we tried.
Well, and I might be on an island by myself with this, but I would much rather have, things be snagged than to allow predatory behavior on our campus go unchecked. And I'm not saying that it's going unchecked now. I'm just saying, like, if we have to talk in extremes here, I want to be the campus that is vigilant about these types of relationships and incidences.
I don't think it's just you. I think it's everyone here for the most part.
Yeah.
And by the way, Ruth and Ellen, guys, all of y'all points, we brought them all up. I mean, they're just really scary, obvious points. And if y'all can think of a more specific way to address this in language, but it was BPAP's sort of overarching idea that the vaguer language was actually preferable.
And actually, Michael Shanahan pointed out at the meeting that there is a zero tolerance policy at an increasing number of colleges, a policy that is more restrictive than this one. And it's becoming a thing. And we're trying to sort of sell this back to the board because this is the board's thing. And if we chop it up too much, then they're going to say, yeah, no, and they're just going to do what they want to do.
Okay, go ahead, say.
You all are addressing it. I'm just kind of having a wonder if it should go in the policy or is it best to leave it out, given that it's best not to be specific. But many of us are in the faculty mentor program. And I know that I'm often take my mentors to lunch, often off campus, as a way to, let's get out of here and let's have a conversation. And occasionally they take a class from me again, right? So I don't know if it's worth putting in there I do see that you have regularly accepted work description, but I'm just worried that this may make people feel like they should not engage in those things with mentors, and maybe they shouldn't.
We talked about that, Pam, and we felt that it was covered under that if you have a college mentor relationship with a student, a formal relationship, that's going to involve to me, this paragraph covers it. I don't think anybody would say that's inappropriate. Now you guys go out and y'all get smashed and, weird things happen, then you step into the realm of inappropriate. But we really tried hard to take all of these types of, I pointed out that at my son's private college, a full-time load for an instructor over the course of an academic year was dropped from 6 classes to 5 classes so that the teachers could have more time to hang out with their students. They really encouraged these type of outside fraternization activities. And I'm going, here we are at City College saying, no, you can't do them. But this is the direction. I really wanted us to say, we do a lot of things with our students, by gosh, and they're good things. That's our strength. and we got to protect those things.
And I just want to add that I would argue that this policy protects those things because if you don't have outlined policy of what's not acceptable behavior, and then those incidences occur, then nobody's going to be engaging with students outside class ever, right? Kathy?
Two things. I would like to assume that we all know what's appropriate conduct and what isn't appropriate conduct, but I don't really think that's always the case, particularly in light of some of the election results. So I think we
That's
need
true.
to be aware that this information needs to be sent out to faculty clearly about what really is appropriate. My biggest concern is the non-credit piece, and I know I've taught a class in non-credit for 40 years, and I have been to those people's homes and had a glass of wine, and you know, they're older adults. It's certainly fine. I would assume that would be an exception, and we would all agree with that. What concerns me is if someone wants to nail you, they can. And sometimes people are looking for ways to do that. And so I think there does need to be something addressing non-credit classes, and I'm not really sure how to do that properly. I'll think about it and let Patricia know, but I do think that's an issue.
Well, and is it non-credit versus credit? I don't think we necessarily want to do that. I mean, if an adult has agency, they have agency, right? I think what we're trying to get at here is where agency is lacking. So, Anna?
So I agree with everything that everyone's saying, and I actually just have a concern about one of the exceptions. Letter C. Wanted to make sure that maybe there was some language that got added that specified that, like, even at those potentially celebratory events that are open to everybody, there should still be adherence to like legal standards, and that like all of this applies, because the way, and I didn't get a chance to prep for the meeting today, so I didn't read it thoroughly prior to, but from what I'm gathering, it kind of makes it sound like if it's open to everyone and it's for an end of the year party, then it's an exception, and that leaves a lot of room for things to happen that this is trying to prevent. So adding something that clearly states that still falls within the legal guidelines and follows all of these things.
Really good point. Yeah, because I see what you mean. It could be kind of a loophole here to slip through that. Okay. Yeah, we'll think about that verbiage more. Tara?
Yeah, Anna stole my thunder. I was actually going to mention this too, because I think it's one thing to have an event open to your entire class and to order a pizza for everybody. That would be okay in my book, but to offer alcohol at that party would be inappropriate because you're creating a potential environment where there could be predatory behavior, not necessarily on the part between a faculty member and the student, but between students, because things happen when people drink. My other question though was wondering if this BP would also be applied to student workers and their managers on campus, because I've had many students feel that they don't have necessarily always the proper support for their grievance process. And I'm wondering if this BP would cover that relationship too.
Patricia, do you have ideas on that? I mean, I think from the get-go, it defines as an employee as staff or faculty or administrator, but I'm not remembering exactly.
Students are excluded from this policy.
Yeah.
But I made a note of that, Tara. I'm taking notes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So with that, are there any more comments about the current policy in front of us?
I have one more point to make. Y'all are going to think I'm like the timeline police here, and I kind of am. The board forces us to get these back to them in 60 days. If you take a look, Ray, go to the top of the policy. I think it's got a September date to it, approval. Yeah, September 28th. We asked Mike Shanahan to go to them and ask if we can have an extension on that because of Christmas break, the Christmas holiday. But if we get a negative answer to that, we got to wrap this up this semester. So we're trying to get the extension. I think I think it's going to take a lot more time. That's my opinion. Some of the points here raised today, I think we need to take them back to BPAP, which would result in another revision. But we are on a 60-day timeline. And the only exceptions the board has been willing to make to that in the past is if there is indeed a break, like a holiday. They generally feel that we take way too long batting these things around in participatory governance. I don't agree with that, but that's been kind of their feeling.
Are there any other concluding remarks? I'm seeing and hearing, oh, Robbie?
Well, so that gives us until November 28th. And I guess that means the board meeting as close to that as exists. Patricia, could you summarize all the notes you're taking, and could we just get that worked out by then? Like, you know, for Tara's comment, could we just add student workers in with staff and faculty?
Well, I don't know if we want to. I mean, the very first time we talked about this, Robbie, you weren't at that meeting. Ray, you were. Somebody brought up student workers, and Michael Shanahan had a really long explanation for why that was not workable. I'm sorry that I can't paraphrase it for you today. I think the whole question of School of Extended Learning is a big one. I mean, I think people have made really good points. You know, predatory behavior can exist anywhere. I'm sorry, that was my point. Ray, whatever Ray's point was. But Kathy also makes another point. This is a different kind of program. These are kind of big questions. So I don't think I would feel comfortable just us. I mean, there's some things we could change. We could probably wordsmith the item C about the celebratory things, but those other things they're big. And also the point about the language, whether we want to be more specific or vague. I don't know if we got any consensus on that. I'm thinking this through, Robbie. I think we need I think we need the extension. Honestly, I think that's what we press for, so that we don't make a hash out of this, that it gives us the time that we need.
So then is our job today to decide if we don't get the exemption, is this okay?
I think that what we need to do is, as flawed as the document is and as complex and as hard and with all the notes, we have to ask our senators to start sharing it with their division and start collecting more feedback. And guys, I hope y'all really understood all the back and forth, because I know the faculty in my division are raising the exact same points that have been raised today. People are all sharing these concerns.
I just want to round us back that this is a BP.
Right.
This is a board policy. This is not an administrative procedure. So, you know, however long we bat this around for, we could give it to the board and they say, nope, none of this, right? So don't want the good to get in the way of the perfect. I always screw that up. That's probably not the right one.
Perfect to get in the way of the good. Yeah, so that's what I think. That was sort of the basis of my last question. I'm thinking we should just move this along if the imperfections are small enough that they are outweighed by the benefit of having a say in such a policy.
I agree with that.
And if we bring it to the board and they have similar concerns to what we brought up, particularly about, say, the non-credit aspect, doesn't that put the whole thing at risk? Like, if we don't resolve that right now, we might accidentally throw out the baby with the bathwater. No?
The way that this works, folks, is that we have to work through channels. So I'll email Michael in the morning, Michael Shanahan, the head of VP, who's the chapter lead on this. And I will tell him that Senate had a significant question about School of Extended Learning. And to see if he wants to take that to the superintendent, who takes that to the board president. And we try to get clarification that way. I mean, I could always just text Robert Miller, but I think I'm breaking the chain of command when I do that. I think we just need to find out what the board's intent is here. We could possibly have identified an open question. So I'd like to try to get an answer to that sooner and not have it derail the whole BP.
So at this time, I'm not seeing any more hands raised for further discussion. So with Patricia's comment just now, keeping that in mind, we'll move on to our last discussion item today, item 8.3, a discussion about faculty needs in terms of questions and information for planning for budget discussions and budget considerations. Would anybody like to open us up? Tara?
I just want to relay a message that I received from PNR that they would really like us, the Senate, to give them some guidance, since giving recommendations about resources is one of their primary responsibilities. They would like to know from Senate how they should manage that responsibility in light of a structural deficit.
Ray, I took some notes from our our town hall, and if you'd like, I can share the notes with the group just to kind of refresh people's memory about the items that were proposed at that town hall. That might provide some structure for recommendations going forward to PNR.
I'd like to interrupt as far as PNR is concerned. At our last meeting, we did talk about this, but I didn't know. I thought I needed to wait until I addressed it with Ray or put it on the agenda in order to bring it forth. So I didn't bring that up, but since Tara brought it up, PNR would like to be more involved in the budget. And my understanding is that in the past, they had a better understanding as to what was going on with the budget. They had more input as to how the budget was allocated. And over the last few years, what PNR has been doing is basically dealing with reader funds and really hasn't been doing a lot. And they would like to be more involved. Pamela came to our meeting last week and really felt the same, that PNR had a greater responsibility or greater role in dealing with the overall budget. And since she's been here, she hasn't seen that. So she was also in favor of PNR being a little bit more involved. But as far as the committee was concerned, they felt that it was necessary that they received direction from the Senate as to what it was that they would be involved in. And so I was waiting to send a message to, or I was waiting for steering to see if this is something that should be placed on the agenda, or just to kind of speak to Ray about it a little bit more. So, if there's more questions, I'd be happy to answer them as far as PNR is concerned.
Patricia, can you mention the list to kind of focus our conversation?
Yeah, can you let me screen share? All right. Where'd it go? Here it is. I just thought it might be a good idea to try to capture what seem to be sort of overarching themes and main ideas. And maybe what we could do is talk about where we would send these things out for more research and more information. So number one, I think we really want to know how much we can actually grow. If there is income that we can get because we need more students, give us an idea of how many more students it is we're talking about. This was one that I think really developed It would be really wonderful if it could work to empower departments to set their own efficiency goals and then give them the tools to help guide this work.
I don't think that you are sharing your screen,
Oh,
Patricia.
okay. You can't see it? Screen share. Hold on. Hold on. How about now?
There you go.
Okay, so sorry. All right, so number one, the whole idea of let's have specific numbers about how much we can grow. If there's still no money on the table, let's go after it, okay? The second one was a sort of overarching idea that any type of work like this needs to be grassroots, department based, and that if departments could be empowered to set their own efficiency goals and then work with the administration, possibly strategic enrollment management, to give them the tools to help guide this work, that would be better than a top-down approach. Jen Wappen from biology made the point that they actually could have more large classes if they had more readers. And Larry Friesen made the point that you can actually, it's efficient to increase the class size and go with a large class TLU than having to pay a faculty member for 2 smaller sections. But readers would be necessary. So do we expand the reader budget and save on faculty salaries? They would like, that we could explore that. Here's the third rail of faculty politics: adjust class caps across the board or by department. Something I think CAC is already talking about. I'm not aware of what y'all are saying, but I know it's on the agenda every Monday. Raise the 50 student cap on DE courses for the same reason. Large size TLUs are less costly than offering multiple sections, 4 versus 6 TLUs. Review what are now defunct NTCC stipends. We are paying stipends out for positions that actually no longer exist. It's just been a really long time since we looked at those. Continue with student-centered scheduling, again, with information on what scheduling students prefer. Several examples of conflicting time blocks were shared. One was a teacher who taught only on Tuesday and Wednesday. The class was offered on Tuesday and Wednesday because the teacher didn't want to drive into Ventura more often. Explore the possibility of hybrid DE classes that could increase class size now that we are learning so much about how to offer DE more effectively, and explore whether cross-listing could have impact on efficiency. We can add to this list, but those were from the notes I took.
So I want to set up a couple ground rules for our conversation now that Patricia shared this list. So all of these ideas aren't going to work for all of us, for all of our programs, for all departments, for all teachers. So for instance, you probably saw one of these and had this gut reaction of, don't touch my NTCC stipend, right? Because of XYZ. Please don't take this list personal. This is what can we do overall. If you as a person or as a department can't touch your NTCC stipend because it is the most, valid one ever, okay, fine. But let us discuss NTCC stipends or this in theory, right? Same thing with class sizes. Robbie is going to tell us, I'm going to tell you, you can't increase my classes because I teach a lab and we only have so much room and safety concerns. Right, but what about the other 85% of classes on campus, right? So we can talk specifics and the details are gonna kill us. Oh, Robbie, you put your hand up. You're totally gonna say something to me now. But I just want us to be thinking about, we have a lot of money to catch up here. So in theory, overall, how can we approach this? What do we wanna do? What do we wanna look at? Ruth, you've had your hand up for a while and that saves me from whatever wrath I'm gonna get from Robbie anyways.
So a couple of things, some related to this that Patricia just presented. One is the role of P&R. There are some of these things that if they act quickly that we can get a response. For example, our reader budget, right? Maybe having a value judgment as to its reallocation, right? Where is it going to go to, right? That sort of thing. Someone has to make that decision or give some advice on that. And they report to Senate, but we also have BRAC, which up until budget issues comes up, BRAC is a non-issue, I think. We have 2 reps on there, which I am not even sure who they are. And how well informed are they? And why aren't we hearing from those folks? And by the way, BRAC, I believe, reports straight to CPC. Okay, so we have 2, right? That's correct. Okay. And then my second point is going to be the timeline. Folks, if we don't act and start making decisions now and start conveying what we value the most, because we value everything, these decisions are going to be made for us, right? So these decisions are going to start to be made, by the end of this term, and many by next term, and then next year's already impacted because we were a little too slow, so too little, too late. My other comment was we are going to have to take some hits, and I don't know how we're going to possibly get any agreement. We're not, right? So that's just, I heard a lot at the town hall over and over, oh, well, you can't cut this, you can't cut that, and no way, and why don't we go after more revenue, more revenue, more revenue? We need to look at cost cutting, right? So I just wanted to re-emphasize that, even though I think it's pretty obvious.
I want to say that our BRAC faculty reps are Patricia Frank and Michael Ganella. And at the beginning of the school year, I did ask them to touch base with me much more frequently. And last meeting, no, the meeting before, my only president report in written form was the reports from those meetings. So they are coming forward to Senate. We're not using them as discussion items. I made that decision because I put them there in text because we don't have a lot of time. But the BRAC structure does need to be called into question, very much so. And that is happening, but outside of this space a little bit. Robbie.
I want to agree with everything Ruth said, and there's a huge component in these decisions for our values, and I really value my coworkers, and I have to say that I am getting out of committee service. I don't do any committee service because I'm on Senate, and I get paid for being on Senate, and I would be more than happy to give up all of my Senate TLUs. So that's an NTC issue. If it meant, and all of you also, if it meant that we didn't have to lay somebody off. And ultimately we're here for students, and that's what benefits students. It doesn't benefit students that I get paid for being here in Senate. It benefits students if I teach a class. I hope it benefits them. And that's what matters. And so I want to put in a little plug for that as we go through this, and as we all recognize that, instructors are prima donnas and we're not going to agree on anything, we should agree on the fact that student benefit is the priority, not how much money you make and not what hours you get to work, but student benefit is the priority. And we have to start asking ourselves value-based questions, like what kind of college do we want to be, and what kind of coworkers do we want to be? Do we want to demand our one TLU for this thing we do, or do we want to say goodbye to our coworker?
And just a procedural question, guys. I'm actually taking notes on this document, and I just realized you guys can all see my notes. Is that okay with y'all? If I take notes, I can make the document disappear also.
It's okay with me.
Okay.
I like it.
All right. Okay.
Ellen?
All right. So I just wanted to share some things that, some feedback that Jen and I got from the ESD division. And one was a request that we do start with establishing what our guiding principles or values would be. What do we hold important? So like Robbie just said, people's jobs over Senate TLUs as perhaps an example. And there were also some specific principles suggested by some ESD faculty. So I'm just gonna paraphrase them because they're a little long really quickly. So there's 5. So one was to not support any budget stabilization effort that would result in the elimination of an instructional department. One was not to support the elimination of funding for student support programs that serve student groups that are disproportionately impacted. One is just the principle that the people or the faculty, staff, and administrators are the most important, and to try to avoid layoffs. Let's see. And another one is so there was some discussion back and forth on this. There was a suggestion if across the board employee cuts could be implemented. They're asking that the Senate support that. But then there was some discussion back and forth among members of our division about that needing to be negotiated. There was discussion about furloughs and stuff like that. And then the last one was that every employee group is equally valued, and therefore any budget stabilization efforts should be equally carried by those groups while factoring in income levels. So those are suggested by PSD.
Thank you, Ellen. Michelle?
Well, I was originally responding to the conversation regarding BRAC, and I think Pamela may have a comment regarding this that would be beneficial, because one of the biggest conversations in our meetings with ITC was, what is it that we're doing and how impactful we are in when we're looking at the budget. And there is no communication with BRAC and ITC. So it appears that everything that ITC hears is after the fact. And also PNR, that what PNR receives is after the decisions have been made. So we're not making any decisions that have any impact or, and Pamela brought this up in our meetings, like, what is your charge? What do you do? How are you involved with the budget? So I think that it's important to hear from Pamela and the conversations that we had. But the other comment that I wanted to make was in relation to what Robbie and Ellen both said. In the past, I think it's more my personal views and not that of my department, have been, I want to do whatever I can to save faculty and staff positions. I want to cut what I can. I would like to give from my benefits or from my salary to make sure that others have a job. But then when I joined Senate, there was so much talk about faculty and staff not doing more because it would lead us down that path of doing more and more without being compensated and protected. So I am a little confused because I was always of the mindset of let's all cut back to help others. And then there was so much talk about let's not continue to do more than we really should be doing because we're not being compensated. And I don't know if I'm really making sense, but it was just, and maybe things are changing because of the times. Maybe things are changing because of what's going on, but there seems to be a switch in faculty and staff doing more and more and more, and without the compensation. And I fear that if we continue to go down that road, it's going to be a revolving, it's going to be like a snowball effect. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but those were thoughts that were coming through my mind as people were speaking.
It makes sense, Michelle. We got it. Thank you for that. Just a quick time check. The time is now 4:44, and I want to make sure that we're leaving time to wrap things up. The discussion items should be centered around what questions do we have? What do we need from administration? What questions should we be asking? So just keep that in mind. Jenny?
The one thing that I just struggle with, as I look at that list that Patricia put up, is I can't tell, which of those options would save us the most money or give us bang for our buck. Without any numbers attached or any kind of additional information, it's like, okay, well, what if everyone said, let's raise our cap size by 1 student, and that saved us $300,000? To me, that'd be like, hey, that could be like a good thing we could do, versus, oh, if we review NTCC stipends, that's only 20,000. So for me, I can't tell what would be effective, and I don't know if maybe PNR.
No, I'm trying to tell you, we have those numbers. Okay. I had them at the town hall. So for instance, we can take a look at NTCC stipends, like right now, can pull up the spreadsheet, right? But yeah, I mean, we've had so far, and I think it's totally fine, but at a certain point, we got to shift gears. Thus far, we've had what I consider emotional conversations around this stuff, right? Like, to me, the town hall was very emotional. Everybody had these gut reactions. So for instance, I had the NTCC stipend spreadsheet ready to show the faculty there. But as soon as I mentioned that, a faculty member said, let's not touch those. Those are so important to us. What about this, right? And then the next faculty member said, can't touch those. What about this, right? So we have those numbers. We can start sharing those out. I
feel like that would help, like, eliminate or reduce that emotional reaction, right? Like if someone said, no, it's just 1 more student, it'd be like, oh, okay then. Or, next semester when we are mostly online, okay, don't change cap size, but take 2 more students knowing that more might drop.
So for instance, Dr. Goswami actually brought this number, and Pamela has brought it before. Each class, and this is impossible, but each class would need to increase by 3 students. So then, like I said, I called out Robbie before. Robbie and I are going to say, you can't increase my chemistry class by 3 students because of safety concerns or the room size. Okay, so if not my class, then this class over here has to increase by 6, right? But the number is 3 students per class. At SEM, they developed a spreadsheet where you can put your TLUs in, the number of times you meet, the current student number you have. You can change the student number and you can see how much FTES you generate. So we have those things, but what I have experienced previously is if you put those in front of us, we react very poorly to them. We meaning faculty. And so the question is, are we at a point, and it sounds like maybe we are, where we can start looking at this stuff more critically without the emotional reaction, right? Just to give you an idea, we have over $1 million being spent in NTCC stipends. That's a lot of money that, as Robbie said earlier, isn't going, you know, in the classroom, isn't, you know, directly serving students. Now, obviously it's serving students in a very indirect way because it allows all of us to do some of the work outside of our classrooms that we need to do, right? So I'm not saying, oh, there's the $1.1 million right there. What I'm saying is, can we start looking at those? Is that an area that we as the faculty body can start looking at? The other thing I'll point out about NTCC stipends is that the few get them, right? The privileged. Not everybody gets an NTCC stipend. So these are the conversations that we got to start having as a faculty body. And I hope that we can keep a level head while we have them. And I hope that I didn't just get myself into trouble by you know, attacking NTCC stipends in this way that I just have. Pam?
I don't want to say this because I agree with almost everything everybody said. I prefer people and employees, everything over just about anything else. However, some of these things or some of this discussion of like, I don't even know, raise our class sizes, give up NTCC stipends. I'm still not 100% sure how that achieves the right sizing of the college, so to speak. So if one of the goals here is to make our college the right size, but we're still keeping every employee, it seems like those two things don't go together. I guess that would be another question. I don't know.
I don't think, so Dr. Goswami has used that language and I can't speak for him, he's not in the room, but let me say this. He has come to me and said, I don't know how many times, you know, we just need to make up the structural deficit. If you don't want to do this, then what? And that's why I keep repeating that to the faculty body. I don't think that the end goal is right-sizing the college. I think right-sizing the college is one means to the end, which is shoring up our $3.5 million structural deficit. So we can ask him directly that question, but I think the answer is we need to figure out the $3.5 million.
So we can keep everybody if we can figure out how to cut the money.
I think it's, so yes, and let me just point out again, 90% of our expenditures on campus are human resources, meaning salary and benefits. So I don't think we necessarily can, like, I don't think the numbers work out that way. However, if they did, I think Dr. Goswami would be open to that. And I want to remind everybody again that that list he brought to CPC, the 5th page of the 5-year planning, the CPC Academic Senate faculty, myself, Patricia, Ruth, I believe Robbie was at that meeting, Pam, you were at that meeting. We asked Dr. Goswami to create that document and that list, right? He's not set in stone on any of it. We just said, hey man, can you give us some idea of what you're thinking? And he said, sure, but please don't nail me on it. And we said, we promise we won't, right? And so my saying this is another attempt at making sure that we don't nail him on that, because that was just him saying, okay, well, the faculty asked me to come up with something by next week's CPC meeting, and here's what I got. But it doesn't have to be that. And if not that, then what? That's the conversation. If not that, then what? Ruth?
Just a time check. I think this conversation that we're not done. So I don't know if folks would be supportive of, I think we need more than 15 minutes. 30 minutes?
Make a motion, Ruth.
Okay, motion to extend this meeting until 5:30 p.m.
Second.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, we have a motion on the table to extend the meeting. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Just to tell you, procedurally, we're going to need to have 11 votes on that to extend the meeting,
Thank you.
2/3.
Thinking about 11 votes, let's get our roll call voting done so that we can see if we're going to make this happen. Cornelia, extending the meeting until 5:30.
Yes.
Counselor Jen,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Penny Baxton,
Yes.
Crystal,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Ivana,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Jennifer Betancourt isn't here today. Stephanie Menendez is here in her place. Stephanie?
Yes.
Excellent. Robbie?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Trisha?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Hey, look at that. It was unanimous. We love spending time with each other. I love it. Where else are we
Okay, I'm
gonna-
not
global
I'm not done. So I'm not done. So my comments.
right.
Next thing is I really encourage those senators from other divisions to speak up, please, because I'm asking myself, why am I talking? But I feel like I have things to say, but I also want to hear whatever you have to say. And then third is that we need to take a short, hard look at, at what we're faced with, right? I hate to be that dismal economist, but if we're asking ourselves what kind of college we want to be, and folks keep on saying, that, well, jobs, well, that's not the college, right? We need to be asking ourselves what kind of college we want to be, and also being student-centered isn't necessarily just thinking saving everyone's jobs, right? So we keep saying, let's keep the jobs, but I just want to point out that doesn't come at no cost, right? Because by keeping a job, that may be a position that we're not filling that would satisfy a student need, right? So computer science, radiology, I have a whole list here, English, right? Whatever it may be. And then, so again, just my economist here. The other thing I want to say is if we, go, although Dr. Goswami is very, into taking our input on this, but let's say hypothetically that we cut tutor funds, okay, is this something we're going to live with for a while? Because this is part of the restructuring, the fixing the structural deficit, right? So this isn't going to be a short-term thing. This is going to be for a while. So I thought that those were a few things we needed to kind of a reality check, right? What do our students need?
Thank you, Ruth. Robin?
Yeah, a couple of things I've kind of been saving up as we go. So one is that I also received feedback from my department of priorities that we be requested to consider priorities similar to the list that Ellen raised. So I would just like to put that 2 divisions gave that feedback. The second thing is Ruth said it right before I did, but who we are as a college is how we serve students. And I agree that we want to prioritize our colleagues and people. But I also have to say that that we also have to cut costs. We've been told that, and that most of our expenditures are in salaries. So we should be looking at ways that we can cut costs that preserves services and support and courses and programs for students, and also hopefully preserve positions that are critical to serving students as well. And my last sort of question and comment is that when we talk about faculty, we're not talking about one group. We have full-time faculty and we have adjunct faculty, and we know that a large number of adjunct at least in some areas, have already been cut. And Rayanne, you were saying, hopefully nobody's going to want to kill me because I brought up NTCC. I'm going to take heat off you right now. And I'm going to say, just a question. Do we know what's more cost effective? Are full-time faculty overloads more cost effective than adjunct faculty? And can we get data on that? Because one way to preserve some jobs that would cost some faculty something would be to cut back on full-time faculty overloads in favor of keeping adjunct employed if the cost is equal, or especially if the cost is less to hire adjunct. And I don't believe I've seen data that would help me make that determination. But like I said, I hope I'm not going to get hate mail and death threats. But I do think that overloads are something that we have considered a right on campus for a long time, and they really should be more considered to be a privilege that maybe should not be exercised at the expense of our colleagues that we are saying in this meeting we value. So I think it's important to remember faculty consists of two groups. So we can't talk about what's good for faculty all in one lump. So that's my 2 cents.
I just want to point out that there was several thumbs up and shaking your head when you mentioned the overloads. So, whatever. Just pointing out the body language since we're all online.
Is there an easy way that we could get data though on the relative cost of, say, hiring adjunct versus faculty overloads, and whether or not there's a difference? And it may be that there's not a cost difference, but it may be that it is one of our value differences. That do we value adjunct faculty as among our colleagues more or less than we value our overloads?
I mean, I'm just going to say the fact that we're all public employees and our salaries are public. I mean, I think this would be somewhat easy to obtain,
I just don't know the comparison. Like, what's the comparative cost between a faculty with 8 TLUs of overload versus hiring an adjunct to teach those 8 TLUs? That would be.
I would imagine there's not a huge difference, because when you teach an overload, you're getting paid adjunct rate. But the second thing you said is maybe where you want to put the emphasis. Do we want to show value to our adjuncts?
Jen, Counselor Jen?
Yeah, I have a couple. I think in your town hall meeting it was discussed, or at some point, our insurance, or I think it was health insurance, maybe cutting back on that. And I didn't know if that was something that was discussed more in the sense of, similar to what Robin said, what is the cost of, what will that save, or what will that, go into? Jenny said, it helps me get an idea of what will save. I don't know. So I was just curious about that, because that could go across the board with full-time faculty and administration, which leads me to question as well, is if 90% of our budget is salary and benefits, will administration and management be also being given this question of how are they going to reduce their salaries as well?
Yeah. So salary. So as a Senate, I want us to stay away from that, because that's our bargaining unit's responsibility. I think so that's something that we could look into as a Senate and get information on, but it's not necessarily something that we could negotiate.
Are you talking about insurance, or are you talking about
both?
Both. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, both our insurance and what we make.
Got it. Okay.
We could certainly, encourage the FA to go after that, but that's not necessarily something in our purview. That's not 10+1, right?
Okay. And then, but just for clarification on my end, is administration being asked to cut their overall budget for management?
So yes.
Okay, that's all I was curious, and not that it's part of us.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Dr. Goswami's, 2-year plan, he is initiating what he's calling a zero-based budgeting protocol this month, at the end of this month, to kind of go through the business processes and, you know, eliminate redundancies. So I think we're going to start seeing those things much quicker than what we'll see in terms of things, quote, affecting faculty. Michelle.
Okay, started off with one thing, but now that everybody's been talking, it's come into several things. So just in agreement with Robbie and Ray, as far as adding those 3 students per class, it really is dependent on your course. Representing the Health and Human Services Department, we are in such a different scope. We are extremely limited by adding people to our labs. They're especially within our COVID environment. We have, you know, 6 students per clinical instructor.
Yeah, Michelle.
Am I even here?
No, you are. But this point is definitely well taken, for sure. Like, we couldn't add students to your classes nor the program, right? So, did she freeze? I think she froze. Anna, we'll come back to Michelle.
It looks like she's back if you want to go back to her now. Or
Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my computer, keeps on cutting out. But again, so it's really department related as far as adding students. Health and Human Services with all the CTE programs, it's impossible to add 1 student to the cohort because
Michelle,
then you need to have another clinical site or another instructor. So it defeats the purpose of adding students. It's
no,
very,
point well taken for your program. It's definitely program specific, right?
Yeah. And then the same thing with the overload. For us, it's adjunct overload. So it's probably cost effective to have overload. And the other, the question that I had when Counselor Jen was talking about administrative decreases, and you had said something about elimination of redundancy. Was that elimination of redundancy for what administration is doing and therefore combining responsibilities?
I don't know specifics. It was my understanding that they needed to start that process so that they could start looking for things like that. I don't have specifics on what it is and what it isn't.
Okay, thank you.
I just know that it's like, you know, on a quote, on that side of things, I'm going to be looking at things. Anna?
So I wanted to just amplify what Robin was saying about the adjunct piece and really honing in on the values component. And I appreciate her bringing it up as the only credit senator that's an adjunct in this room. It can be a little bit intimidating to bring these concerns up to a room full of full-time faculty when you're basically asking them to prioritize not your own needs, right? And keeping in mind that the general feeling amongst adjuncts is that they don't feel valued on this campus and that we want to participate. And so if there is capacity, and obviously, again, I think this depends on a lot of different things, right? Like our programs and the availability of adjuncts and all of that stuff, but keeping in mind that if it's possible, trying to sort that out. And I am one of those folks who looks up everybody's salary. So just as an FYI, and there's, I think, definitely capacity for folks to take a step back in these trying times to try to allow folks a little bit more room, I guess, to exist, especially living in places like Santa Barbara, which are crazy expensive. And second, I just wanted to also amplify the point of evaluating for redundancy. And I think that that can be done definitely at the administration level, but also kind of just across campus, where are there people that are doing similar work that could be combined in ways that doesn't impact student success, right? So if there's multiple programs that are doing the same thing, but serving different students, that doesn't feel redundant to me. But if it's the same students that are kind of being served and the need isn't there, I think that there's ways for us to kind of get creative about how we navigate that. And then my last point is that I don't think it's possible to separate emotions from this process. So I just really want to put that back. And Ray, I hear what you're saying about like, we need to step away from emotions and kind of deal with the facts. And I get the intent of that, but I just want to be clear that as someone who's likely at the bottom end of the spectrum here in terms of job security and stuff like that, it's hard to separate emotions, but I think it's possible for us to engage in this dialogue in meaningful ways that aren't only centering the emotional components. But that's it.
No, thanks for saying that. So let me say what I was trying to say differently then, because clearly I said something too broad. Those with positional power should be detaching their emotions from it, right? So, you know, when we start talking about, sorry guys, when we're talking about NTCC stipends that a few get, adjuncts don't get these, right? For the most part. And people say, no, I do extra work for that, right? And I'm not trying to minimize the work they do for that, but with that comes a cost, right? So if we're going to keep these, then there's going to be a cost there. So that's what I mean of like, those with positional power need to start thinking that what they're saying and choosing with their emotional responses without numbers in front of them are affecting others with less privilege on campus. Yeah. I think equity in this conversation needs to not just be centered around students.
I agree.
Needs to be centered around our employees as well. So
Agreed.
if you are a faculty member with an overload and a big fat NTCC stipend or 3 of them, and I'm not saying anybody has 3 of them, but like, and you sit there and say, well, don't touch this, don't touch that, don't add students to my classes, because that's what I'm seeing. I'm being very extreme, but that's what I feel like I'm seeing. And
got it.
Don't do this, don't do that, right? So Anna, it wasn't don't have emotions about this. It was don't let your emotions drive you when we need to think about a lot of things.
Got it.
I hope that helped or sheds a different light on what I was trying to say.
Definitely appreciate the clarification, and it actually made me think of my last point, which I forgot to mention. And it kind of I guess this is a response to the compensation of work that happens on campus, and kind of hearing what some of the concerns are about doing additional work without getting compensated and the slippery slope that kind of creates. Just wanting to make sure that folks understand that there's lots of people on this campus that do uncompensated work on a regular basis who don't have the opportunity to be compensated for it in the first place. And that most of those people are staff people, and that most of those people are people of color, and that most of those people are women. And again, kind of keeping that equity mindedness in making these decisions, I guess, just kind of amplifying what you just said then, Ray. Not everybody gets compensated for work that's above and beyond. And I'm speaking from personal experience with a lot of the things that I've been involved in and gotten zero compensation for, because it's good for students, right? And obviously that's not ideal. And there's going to be a time for us to address that, but just wanted to put that in the room as well.
I really appreciate that. Robbie.
So I want to agree with and amplify everything Ray and Anna just said. And And I think normally we're used to saying, you know, well, we need to get compensated for the work we do. That's the fight we fight, but things are different now. And you know, like I'm all in favor of completely abolishing NTC stipends. And there's what is it, a third of our task achieved right there, boom. I think that I think we need, I would like to know what our way is of expressing this sentiment, if we all share it, to Dr. Goswami, because, and I think that's also a way for us to look at what the outcome of this conversation is.
So to answer your question, it's both formal and informal. So how do we get this to Dr. Goswami? There are several of us that are in this meeting today that sit at tables with Dr. Goswami that have his ear, myself included. And so we need to be relaying that information to him constantly. He is, in my opinion, receptive to this, but it is something that is our job at those tables when these things come up, to relay that information. Also, as a Senate, we represent the faculty body as a whole. I think we need to come together and formalize some of the things that we're talking about. When we're in this room, you know, we often hear from the same voices. And then what that gets translated into is the Senate said this. I'm not convinced that the Senate says anything until we voted on it, for the most part. I mean, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? So, you know, it's almost as if like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Well, if the loudest people at the Senate table are sharing their sentiments, that's not necessarily the feeling of the whole Senate unless we have some kind of formal motion. So I want to bring back the suggestion that Ellen brought up, Jen brought up, maybe Robin did as well, perhaps a few others. I think that our conversation in the future should be centered around some kind of agreed upon, whatchamacallit, like who do we want to be? How do we want this to look? And Anna's clapping her emoji hands. I like that. So she must agree with me, right? So if we come up with that, and I'd like to do it rather quickly, not to rush it, but just to get it established, to center our conversations as we move forward so that we can formalize things. I think that would help us a lot. I also want to say that these things can come for, that was all the formal piece of how they can get, you know, shared with Dr. Goswami. It can also be shared informally, right? So I have meetings with Dr. Goswami. If I understand where the faculty body is with this stuff, I can confidently say that to him. I gotta tell you guys, after the faculty town hall, I didn't feel like I could tell him really anything. I felt as though the faculty body was a little bit all over the place, which I expected. I purposely scheduled a very loose meeting so that we could emotionally process with each other. But in the future, I do want our conversations to be more centered and more focused so that we can come up with a list of things, and not just a list of our, our wants or our shared values, but also like suggestions for reducing the budget. And I think Ruth said it before, I said it at the town hall. If we don't come up with good suggestions, they will come up for us. That's not proper English. You know what I'm trying to say. It's the day after election. It's after the meeting. I'm holding a cranky baby. You know what I'm trying to say. So
Is it the day after election though? For me, the election's going on and on.
With that, I'll turn it over to Kathy. She's had her hand up for a while.
Yes, I've been listening here. It's a very good discussion. I have a couple of things I won't bother with right now, which is about online class size, which is an issue for curriculum. However, on the NTCC committee, what I would like to recommend, Rayanne, is that our committee convene and that we very methodically go through the NTCC stipends. We wanted to do this last year and we sort of ran out of time due to COVID. And I know that there are stipends in there probably given to faculty who probably aren't doing that work anymore at all. I think we can make some significant changes there. I would just like to say, though, to those of you that have never been a department chair or have forgotten what it was like to be a department chair, it's a horrendous job. We do not have enough administrators on this campus to do the work that department chairs do. That's why we have department chairs. It's a different model than a lot of colleges. And I know that if all of a sudden department chair stipends were eliminated, we would also eliminate all of the department chairs. My department chair stipend was cut tremendously this year due to a cut in over 100 TLUs in my department. And I'm doing more work than I've ever done. And, you know, that's the way it is. And we all do a lot of unpaid work on this campus, at least most of us do, which is fine. We get that. But there are some responsibilities that faculty do that really need to be compensated, or the work just won't get done. So I hope that we can do this in a methodical way, that our committee can look at this to begin with and start making recommendations that we can bring back to the Senate. And remember, NTCC is a combined committee between the Faculty Association, the Senate, faculty, and the administration. So it really needs to be done in a collegial, consultative way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Kathy. And department chairing is an enormous amount of work. I do it myself. I'll also point out that we have a number of department chairs as well. We have a large amount of department chairs. And so is that something we can look at? You know, does it always make sense to have a department of one also have a department chair, right? So I think, so I agree with you, and I think that the department chairs are still an area that we can look at also, right? Michelle and then Trisha, and I just want to point out that it's 5:20.
Real quick, I just wanted to, I'm a department chair and I'm a department director. And to sound horrible, which I will be gone if my stipend is cut. I cannot, it's the work that I do is crazy, insane, and I know a lot of people do crazy, insane things. So if there is an NTCC meeting that is coming up, I really would like to make sure that everybody is invited to that, especially the chairs. I just think it's important for everybody to know if something is going to change, that those that are involved are informed of it ahead of time.
I just want to say, I don't think department chair stipends are going to be touched at all. Let me just say that. We don't even have to take time to discuss it. The number of department chairs, we might want to explore that, but the department chair stipend is not going away anytime. So yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm worried about. What I think when we say NTCC stipends, what we mean is like, you know, and again, I'll use my department as an example. We have what's called lab coordinator positions, where if there's multiple adjuncts teaching the same class, there's a lab coordinator that makes sure there's continuity over all the sections. Well, recently we've basically done away with different teachers for different sections. And so we have this lab coordinator that's not coordinating anything, right? Is that an area where we can give up the stipend? I think so. Right? It's up to NTCC. It's a negotiated item, but I think that we can talk about that. The department chair stipend for chemistry, no, that's a lot of work, right? So I just want to make sure that folks don't confuse, you know, when we say let's eliminate NTCC stipends, that we're saying that starts with the chairs. It doesn't. I do think our chair structure can also be looked at. Trisha?
I just want to clarify what you would like from me and by when. So what I would like to do is maybe do a survey with my constituency group, maybe clarify the priorities so you get numbers, you know, how much the faculty supporting it, what their suggestions are for saving, what their suggestions are for bringing in revenue. That would be like removing obstacles that are preventing us from getting more revenue. And also I wondered if, the what you want, when you want it, and then also this idea of whether a suggestion is temporary or whether it's something that's more structural. So for example, to give up a stipend, maybe or to shorten their teaching hours, people might be willing to do that, right now while we're in the crisis, but they might be worried that if they offer it now, it's sort of like a permanent thing that's built in and it'd be really hard to get back. So I don't know.
That's by definition, that's by definition structural.
Yeah,
permanent.
Exactly. So are we looking at both temporary and structural changes? And that's what I'm saying. What do you need from me and when? And would that be helpful to identify, or is it possible? Because I guess if it's a temporary, maybe we could label it as temporary versus structural.
Well, it is structural, meaning like we need to figure out permanent solutions, not temporary solutions, which is why human resources are being discussed. I don't know that I don't know. Other people can chime in. I think this is I think you should ask the question to the group and not necessarily me. I don't know that polling or surveying faculty for ideas is that helpful. Some people are tuned in, some people aren't. So I don't know how much, quality information you would get by doing that per se.
More like ranking, like, we have those suggestions that you offered. I could tailor them to non-credit and say how, any comments or anything how would you prioritize this? That's more like that rather than like a random, let's charge for parking in the parking lot kind of stuff, So that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so if you start there, that would be beneficial. I don't know that asking open-ended questions to the general public, meaning our public, would be that helpful at this point or a good use of your time. But certainly taking the suggestions thus far to your faculty and saying, okay, what compromises are you willing to make? Which was something discussed at the town hall meeting, going back to your departments and having these conversations. So that
would be helpful for you to bring to Dr. Goswami, saying that, this constituency group or maybe the whole faculty indicated that this was something that they would, that this was something please don't do unless it's a last resort. And this is something we're willing to give up that could be on the top of the list. That would be helpful for you.
Yes.
Okay. And what date ideally would you need this by?
Next meeting.
Okay.
Sooner rather than later. These conversations have already started happening at CPC and places like that. The board is discussing this at every meeting. So sooner rather than later.
And the idea about the values, that we were talking about that in the beginning, is that something that would be helpful to articulate as well for the different constituency groups and to send that to you so you can share with Dr. Goswami?
Yes, very much
Okay.
so. And if folks are bringing it back to Senate, we can formalize that and like I was mentioning earlier, perhaps vote upon it so that we can say we have this, this is how the Senate feels.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Jenny, we have about 3 minutes left, so we definitely got to wrap up our conversation and meeting.
So I'm wondering if Patricia would be willing to share the doc that she's been working on with us. And so maybe when we go to our constituents, we have, some organization to the discussion points.
I can tell you guys what my notes mean. They're strictly my notes, but I've been really thinking a lot through this whole conversation about where can we get, because the agenda topic was the need for more information and how to get it. So I think because of the places I've occupied as your past Senate president, a lot of this information is already out there. I mean, I am quite certain of it, especially you can see I'm listing the Strategic Enrollment and Management Committee that's done a ton of this work. It's just they've been very developmental in nature. So in terms of, first off, Jenny, I put the big ticket items, in my opinion, have the asterisks by them. You asked, what are the things that are going to really save us money? Class caps will save us money. Third rail, very sensitive, very contentious. We could, but that they'll save us money. NTCC stipends could probably carve off a couple of $100,000. And as you said, with looking at defunct positions, and student-centered scheduling, SIM has been all about that. So what I would like to do is ask you guys if you would let maybe steering come back with a list of draft principles of budgeting. When Dr. Benjamin was here and we did develop the budget in a very collegial way, we started off by developing a statement of our values. And I've heard that said again and again today. How do we know what we want when we don't even know what we all appreciate and value? We could bring those forward at the next meeting. We could also ask our representatives on SIM to come back with some really specific answers to these questions. We could authorize our representatives on the NTCC to start evaluating that stipend spreadsheet and looking for things that are the low-hanging fruit, if you will. But and we could either ask, we could ask our P&R committee to take a look at readers and see if they can do a cost benefit analysis on where we break off with that. I don't quite know who we go to with that. I think the very cogent question of TLU overloads versus giving that money to adjuncts. Is there a cost savings there? But we could also add that to the list. So I was thinking about that as a way to move forward, but definitely step one, we need those statement of budget of our principles, our values.
And I wonder if P&R, if they can do any of that work in terms of that comparison between overloads and adjunct salaries, like maybe they could put something together.
It's personnel information. I can't imagine that a committee would be given that.
But they could do the research.
I know P&R, this is Michelle, P&R has been dying to be more involved in helping with the budget and wanting tasks assigned. As Ray said, being that it's an HR issue, but there may be some investigative things that they can do to compare adjunct salaries to overload, because I think there's a big difference between adjuncts that are lab and adjuncts that do lecture. But there may be a cost savings there.
Is there because
hold on.
Guys, right now what we need to do is decide who answers that question. We don't need to answer the question. We need to decide who are we going to give these questions to so that we can get answers so we can talk about this. You're right. P&R is very hungry to get more involved. They can do the research on this and bring us back answers. I also want to say I wrote down number 11, consolidate departments to save on stipends. This is a feasible idea. I've worked with 3 college presidents so far, and all 3 of them within a couple of weeks on campus goes, why do you guys have 56 departments? Many of which have 1 and 2 faculty members. So sensitive, but certainly something that could be explored. I can't think right now who would do it, but I put it on the list. It's number 11. Actually, Ray brought it up, but I wrote it down.
Friends, the time is now 5:32. So we either need to end our meeting or extend it by 15 more minutes, and we have 3 hands still up. So
it's pretty open-ended at this point. If you guys wanted to authorize steering to come up with, take these notes and come up with a more specific plan, I think we could do that and bring that back to the Senate at our next meeting.
I propose that we pass this on to steering and have them consolidate some of these thoughts and bring it back.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Can we email you, Patricia, with further ideas to add to your list?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
And guys, remember, it's
Just a note,
ideas and who is the person we go to get that information so that the Senate can have an informed discussion on it. And if you don't know who the person is, right, I don't know who the person is, and we'll try to figure it out.
And just so you know, Senate steering is meeting tomorrow for our next meeting. So if you have thoughts, just jot them off and send them to us.
Yeah.
So we can get it on the next agenda.
Kathy O'Connor, really quick.
Very quickly, I think this needs to go to P&R. We want to work on this stuff. We need to have these discussions. We can probably be helpful.
Awesome. With that, is there somebody that would like to motion to end the meeting?
I'll move
I-
to end the meeting.
Second.
I've been seconded. Unmute yourself. Agree if you agree.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Olive.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Olive.
Bye, Olive.
Aw.